Perfect Dark, Skull and Bones, Beyond Good and Evil 2. What do these three games have in common? All games that were and are highly anticipated? All games stuck in development hell at some point? These might all be true, but they are all also games that have been called quadruple A. I'll be honest, I have a hard time not having an instinctive eye roll when I hear the term quadruple A. To me, it sounds a little bit too much like made-up terms that really don't mean anything. I think it is supposed to make people think that these games are very high quality and worth buying, but if the reception of Skull and Bones shows anything, it's that quadruple A may just mean massive disappointment. While thinking about this issue though, it led me to step back and ask another question. A question I hadn't really thought about too deeply. What is a AAA game? I may scoff at the idea of a quadruple A game, but I know that I have used and felt comfortable with the AAA, so why was there a difference in my thinking? And as I was thinking about the issue, I found that I really didn't know what a AAA game was exactly. I have of course heard the term and even used it myself, but really thinking about it, what does saying that a game is a AAA game even really mean? Looking at the origins, many seem to think that the AAA designation is a term borrowed from investments. AAA being a safe investment and most likely to reach financial goals or even surpass them. I find this origin interesting, especially in the current environment where high-profile games aren't meeting expectations, which can lead to layoffs and even studio closures. While this may be the origin of the term, it doesn't feel like this is the driver of what makes a game AAA to many people today. Since AAA is one of those ill-defined terms, people will have all kinds of uses for it and mean all kinds of different things with it. But thinking about it myself and doing some reading, it seems like there are some common ideas of what makes a AAA game. Let's take a look at them. The first is a large budget. AAA games are usually made with huge budgets that are typically in the tens of millions of dollars range. There are some games though that have budgets that hit over 100 million. Cyberpunk 2077 had a budget of 174 million, while Genshin Impact's budget as an online game with regular updates is now somewhere around 700 million total. So when we're talking about AAA games, we're talking about a lot of money being used in the development of the game. And this isn't necessarily even including the marketing budget for a game. This is often another expensive aspect that can take many millions of dollars that's already on top of the large development budget. A AAA game means that there's a lot of money being spent. The second aspect of AAA games is that they tend to be out of big studios. This shouldn't be too much of a surprise due to the need for substantial amounts of money. AAA games tend to come from large, well-established studios. So studios like Microsoft, Sony, Capcom, Square Enix, EA, Ubisoft, Epic Games, and Nintendo are the kind of companies who we're dealing with here. These are the big companies in the gaming world that have the money and staff to take on these bigger projects. While there are some studios that aren't quite as large as these that put out games that are sometimes labeled as AAA, there does tend to be a connection of AAA to large game studios. This also gets murky though, as you get studios like From Software that have budgets that may fall in the AAA area but are a smaller company. You can also have larger companies put out smaller experiences that don't have the bigger budgets behind them. Again, the whole AAA designation isn't always super clear cut, but these are tendencies, and I feel like the more of these tendencies that happen in a game, it makes it more likely that they'll be labeled as a AAA. The third is graphics quality and technology usage. I think that most gamers tend to use AAA games when talking about this aspect in particular, because AAA games tend to be the cutting edge when it comes to what they're offering up. They're often using the most recent graphical technologies to create detailed worlds, characters, and effects in their game. Oftentimes, this is with an eye to creating a world that looks as close to real as possible. This may also utilize technologies like motion capture in order to make characters move and act in realistic ways. Oftentimes, this graphics and high cutting edge technology is often what people use whenever they're talking about AAA games. This isn't all about graphics though. It can be the creation of open worlds that have many things to do for the player. This is where many games in the AAA space seem to go, is to have a giant open world with lots of things to do. We see this in the Witcher series, the Grand Theft Auto series, Red Dead Redemption series, Assassin's Creed, the Marvel Spider-Man series of games. Like, there are so many of these these games that have large worlds to explore. So it's not just making a game look good, but it's creating a whole world for you to be able to interact with at that level of detail. Audio is also an area where AAA games can invest heavily in. Voice acting is a huge way that this takes place by having all the characters voiced and sometimes even having big talent filling some of the major roles in the game. This can also include having an epic soundtrack to go along with the game created by well-known composers. The point is that often AAA games are using the best technology in the hopes of presenting a game that is at the cutting edge when released. Whether this is always actually successful or not is another issue, but this is the goal. Fourth is franchises. With the high budgets and big risks behind AAA games, you find that games are often either a part of a series or trying to start up some new franchise. So when you think of the big AAA games that have been around for years, you'll think of Call of Duty, Battlefield, Zelda, Mario, Fallout, The Elder Scrolls, Resident Evil, Assassin's Creed, Final Fantasy, and I'm sure you can fill out that list with even more and more games that have multiple entries in it. Now often, I think the idea here is that if you have a successful title, a sequel will bring those who enjoyed the first in the series back for more. This can help you recoup costs easier, but can come at the expense of innovation and creativity. This can make the road a bit more uncertain, as long-time series can start to feel stale and repetitive if they don't evolve over time, but sometimes changing too much can also isolate long-time fans who enjoyed the series and didn't want things to change, at least to the degree that it wound up changing in that entry. While not every AAA game falls into this, I think that the vast majority do. I don't want to be so cynical to think that video game series are just made for money purposes and not for the creative idea of story and world building, but I'm not nearly naive enough to think that it's not part of the equation. To me, these are the four things that are most important in calling something a AAA game for people. It is mostly about the cost of development and the desired end product to look as cutting edge as possible. This results in an emphasis on franchises and sequels to keep people coming back to worlds and characters they know and are invested in. Now, all of these factors are used to attempt to make a great game, but being great is not really part of what makes a game AAA. Well, generally, the amount of money and talent behind a game will make a AAA game more likely to be at least above average. That's often not what a AAA game needs to be in order to be considered successful. There are super high expectations for these games to make a profit after their high cost and investment. The label of AAA can often add a layer of expectation to games as well that can cause distorted standards when compared to other games people don't consider AAA. A game that is just good or even okay can be viewed more harshly when hype and expectations are for a game that will deliver a great experience. On the flip side, there are many great games that nobody would consider to be AAA. Terraria, Stardew Valley, Bastion, Rogue Legacy, Vampire Survivors, and many other games that would be considered indie or I don't know what other kind of categories you would label them as, are fantastic experiences despite not falling into this category of games. As I've gotten older, I found that using the AAA label for games hasn't really been all that helpful. There are AAA games that I've considered great, like the Marvel Spider-Man series, but there have also been ones I've played that are quite flawed, even if they are somewhat enjoyable, like Overwatch 2 and Marvel's Avengers come to mind here. There are also ones that can be fun, but the way they're handled isn't quite as enjoyable for me. And the big one that comes to mind here is Call of Duty. AAA and the newly minted AAA feel more like advertising speak and a term of financial expectation than it does a guarantee of quality, even though those who use it may want it to be. I also feel that ballooning budgets for games will cause the AAA space to rely more and more on tactics that are designed to increase a return on investment, which may or may not increase the enjoyment of said games. So these are my thoughts on this topic. What are yours? Do you think I missed something about what makes a AAA game? Do you find the designation more helpful than I do? Let me know in the comments so we can continue the discussion there. But that's all for this video though, so I'll see you in the next one.